The deepest thing in the world is when you thank Hashem for everything that you have, mamash, everything. Everything in the world draws back to Hashem. So join me together.
Good evening! How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? That was Joey Newcomb singing his song, Borei, as in the one who creates. And Borei is a word we use in so many blessings, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe. Borei pri ha'etz, who creates the fruit of the tree. Borei pri ha'gafen, who creates the fruit of the wine. Borei mine mizonos, who creates the grains, basically, the species of nourishment, etc. He's telling us that when we remember to thank the Creator for all the blessings in our lives, even the simple things, the simple foods that we take for granted, bringing gratitude into our lives all the time, everything goes better. How are you doing? Sight of the darkness. Who is with us as we get together to do a double daf? We're going to be covering 2 pages today. Quick announcement right at the top. Tomorrow's class is going to be a little bit early, 5:30 p.m. instead of 6. Nina and I are going to a friend's screening for a new film. We want to support their film and be there for them. So we have to do the class a little early tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Pacific instead of 6, just half an hour early. Who is with us today? Yehudit in South Carolina, Stephen in New Hampshire, Pauline in Arkansas, Melissa in Great Neck, Nancy in North Carolina, Randy in Florida, Renee in Indiana, Paula in Chicago, Hannah in New York, John in Maine, James in Indianapolis, Paul in the Great Northwest, Doris from the Philippines. Wow, welcome Doris from the other side of the world. Great to have you with us. Belle in North Texas, Diana in New York, Christo in Lubbock, Timothy in Kansas, Bill in mid-Missouri, Lucy in Minnesota, Sandy in Michigan, Sam in Central Virginia. Sam, good to see you. Been a while. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Virginia, Neil in Virginia, Maggie in Belleville, Ohio, and Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Lots to cover today, so let's get into it. We are holding by Tractate Rosh Hashana, the 9th volume of the Talmud. Today we'll be doing pages 22 and 23. I wasn't here yesterday, so we're doing a double today. You know, this Tractate Rosh Hashana, the first Mishna, right, about when is the new year at different times of the year, I think we spent 2 weeks learning the first Mishnah, right? There was Gemaras for 14 pages on the first Mishnah. Today, in 2 pages, we'll be doing 6 Mishnayos. So there's a lot to cover. Let's get right into it. Some really interesting stuff today. We start right near the top of page 22 on the A side. The Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 1. If a father and his son saw the new moon, they should both go to the court in Jerusalem. It is not that they can join together to give testimony, for close relatives are disqualified from testifying together. Now, normally we think about witnesses giving testimony in a court case, a criminal case, maybe even a capital case, right? Not by the testimony of one witness, only by the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall a person suffer the death penalty, never by the testimony of one witness. So in capital cases, you need a minimum of 2 witnesses. Here we're learning that in terms of witnesses coming before the Sanhedrin to testify that they had seen the new moon and it was time to sanctify the new month, also the rules of witness testimony are going to apply, including that two close relatives can't be the two witnesses. And it makes sense, right? You don't want witness collusion, as it were. You're concerned, and that's why you have two witnesses, and they need to be independent people. And if they're very close relatives, it might be, that one of them saw it, the other one is just kind of supporting their close relative, and it's not really two witnesses. And so you might think, well, maybe that doesn't apply to the testimony about the new moon. And now the Mishnah is saying that it does apply. A father and son, wait a minute, where am I going? A father and son saw the new moon, they should go, right? So you would think, oh, wait a minute. Like the law of witnesses in a capital case, a father and son should be disqualified, but actually no. In the case of witnesses testifying about the moon, they should go. They should both go to the court. Is it that they can they're both qualified to testify as a pair of witnesses? Not quite. They should both go to the court in Jerusalem. It is not that they can join together to give testimony, because close relatives are disqualified from testifying together. But rather, they should both go so that if one of them is disqualified, the second may join together with another witness to testify about the new moon. That is the anonymous opinion, the majority. Rabbi Shimon says a father and his son and all their relatives are fit to combine together as witnesses for testimony to determine the start of the month. So in any case, a father and son who saw the new moon should go to Jerusalem, according to Rabbi Shimon, because they can combine to be witnesses for this kind of a testimony before the Sanhedrin, even though they couldn't combine to give testimony in a criminal case. The other opinion is they should go, not that they can combine, but because there should be lots of witnesses in Jerusalem, and it may be that one of them gets disqualified for a different reason, and then the other one can join with some other person who is there. Rabbi Yosef said there was an incident with Tovia the doctor, and when he saw the new moon in Jerusalem, he and his son and his freed slave all went to testify. The priests, the Kohanim, accepted him and his son as witnesses and disqualified his slave, for they ruled stringently that the month may be sanctified only on the basis of the testimony of those of Jewish lineage. And when they came before the court, they accepted him and his slave as witnesses, but they disqualified his son due to familial relationships. So as we can see, there's been some contradictions and debate about, well, what exactly are these laws of testimony? Who is qualified? One opinion was, well, you have to be a Jew to testify. But then it turns out, no, this freed slave could testify. You could say father and son can testify, at least according to Rabbi Shimon. But in this incident, they were not allowed, the father and son, to testify together. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara. Rabbi Levi said, what is the reason for Rabbi Shimon's opinion permitting relatives to jointly testify about the new moon, despite the fact that relatives are generally disqualified from testifying together? It is, as it is written, this is going to be Rabbi Shimon's source in Torah for allowing close relatives to testify together. Exodus 12:1 and 2. We've seen this over and over again. This is the first commandment given to the nation as a nation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speaking of Nisan, the springtime month. And the words to you come to teach that this testimony concerning the new moon will be valid even when it is given by you. Meaning you too, Moses and Aaron, the two of you who are brothers and could not ordinarily testify together. So that's why Rabbi Shimon says, well, normally we don't take two brothers testifying together, but about the new month, they can, since their commandment was originally given to the brothers, Moses and Aaron. The Gemara asks, and with regard to the rabbis, the majority who disagree with Rabbi Shimon and prohibit relatives from testifying together about the new moon, how do they understand this verse? And the Gemara answers, they interpret the verse as follows: this testimony is given over to you and others like you. That is to say, the months are to be established by the most outstanding authorities of each generation. In other words, according to the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon, this verse that says to you about Moses and Aaron, what it's saying is the ones who establish the new month have to be the religious leaders of the generation. In other words, the Sanhedrin. Moses and Aaron were acting as the Sanhedrin of the Jewish people. They could hear testimony and sanctify the new month, declare that the new month had started. But according to Rabbi Shimon, the words to you in that verse means that brothers could testify. What is the law before we leave this Mishnah behind? If a father and his son saw the new moon, a father and his son who both saw the new moon should both go to the court to testify. If the testimony of one is deemed unfit, the other one can join with witnesses and testify. So we hold like the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon. The father and son should go to Jerusalem and be ready to testify, but they won't be taken as a pair of witnesses because they're father and son. Mishnah number 7. The following are unfit to give testimony about the new month before the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem when we were establishing the calendar each month by having witnesses testify. The following people are unfit to give that testimony because they are considered thieves and robbers. One who plays dice or other games of chance for money, a professional gambler. And those who lend money with interest, a usurer. And those who race pigeons and place wagers on the outcome, professional gamblers. And merchants who deal in the produce of the sabbatical year, which may be eaten but may not be the subject of commerce. And slaves. And this is the principle. Any testimony for which a woman is unfit, these too are unfit. Although in certain cases a woman's testimony is accepted, for example, to testify to the death of someone's husband so that that woman can remarry and is not stuck because there's no proof that her husband died. There's only one witness who saw it. In this case, you could take the testimony of one witness, and that one witness can be a woman or a minor or certain other people who are normally disqualified. Now, to the modern ear, this sounds terrible. Right? What do you mean women can't give testimony? Obviously, women are qualified and perfectly good, perfectly capable of giving testimony. You could argue maybe minors can't give testimony, but why can't women give testimony? This is in ancient times. I don't even know when you're talking about a Beis Din taking testimony today, in certain cases that come before a Beis Din, whether they accept the testimony of women witnesses or not. I don't know. Why we might speculate was were women disqualified in the ancient world? Probably because women were considered to not have the agency, right? Just like a husband could annul the vows of his wife, maybe it was considered that the husband could tell the woman how to testify, tell his wife how to testify, and for that reason, women were considered not qualified. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating now. But in the ancient world, women were generally disqualified along with minors, slaves, and other people who did not have sort of power over their own agency. However, women could testify for another woman that she had seen her husband was dead, and now that woman was released from that marriage and can remarry. Gemara. This implies that any testimony for which a woman is fit, these two are fit. And Rav Ashi said, that is to say, one who is regarded as a robber by rabbinic law, i.e. one who illegally came into possession of money but did not actually steal it from another, so he's technically a robber, is like those mentioned in the Mishnah. Although they are generally unfit to give testimony, they are fit to give testimony to enable a woman to remarry. Right? This is the agunah problem. And you can imagine, especially in ancient times, a husband goes off to war to be a soldier in the army, and he disappears. He dies on the battlefield, he gets buried. They didn't have a really good system of keeping track of who was there, and he never comes back. And they don't know, did he die in battle? Did he get hit on the head and get amnesia? Did he run away? If he's still alive, his wife can't remarry. If he's dead, she can remarry. But you need two witnesses to testify to that kind of thing, so she would be free to remarry. But that could be onerous, and she would just never know and never be free to marry again. And so the sages kind of relaxed the stringency of that law. So even by the testimony of one witness, and even one witness who in other cases would be unfit to testify, in this case that testimony would be accepted. Mishnah number 8, the final Mishnah of chapter 1 here in Tractate Rosh Hashana, and there's not even a Gemara commentary on it. We end on a Mishnah. With regard to one who saw the new moon, but is unable to go to Jerusalem by foot because he is sick or has difficulty walking, others may bring him on a donkey or even in a bed, even on Shabbos if necessary. And if the witnesses are concerned that bandits may be lying in wait for them along the road, they may take clubs or other weapons in their hands, even on Shabbos. I mean, this is one of the sources for why on Shabbos, somebody who is involved in security for his synagogue, like I'm a member of such a team, and we carry firearms in synagogue on Shabbos. Normally, you cannot carry a firearm on Shabbos, but if it's for the safety of the congregation, because, tragically we live in a time where there have synagogue shootings, etc. Because there's danger, because it is a time of danger, people can carry a firearm even on Shabbos. It's not considered a desecration of Shabbos. And here we see the same thing. When these witnesses, we already established that they could desecrate Shabbos, in other words, traveling farther than the normal travel limit on Shabbos in order to reach Jerusalem and testify before the Sanhedrin they had seen the new moon. Not only can they go that far distance, they can also carry weapons, they can carry a person on a litter, they can carry, and in the second paragraph, and if it was a long journey to Jerusalem, they may take sustenance with them. Although it is ordinarily prohibited to carry on Shabbos outside of an Erev, since for a distance of a walk of a night and a day, the witnesses may desecrate Shabbos and go out to give testimony to determine the start of the month. This is as it is stated, these are the festivals of the Lord, sacred gatherings, which you shall declare in their seasons. And this teaches that in all cases, the festivals must be fixed at their proper times, even if it entails the transgression of Torah prohibitions, walking too far on Shabbos, carrying weapons on Shabbos, carrying food on Shabbos, carrying a person on Shabbos, etc. We do that so that the new month could be established. Obviously, we don't do that now because the calendar has been set in advance. All the astronomical calculations have been done, and we don't have a Sanhedrin receiving testimony from witnesses who had seen the new moon. But we expect that when the Messiah comes, the third temple is rebuilt, the Sanhedrin will be reconstituted, and they will take the testimony of witnesses in Jerusalem to establish the new month. That closes chapter 1 of Tractate Rosh Hashana. We move on to chapter 2. Mishnah number 1. We are at the bottom of the A side of page 22. Mishnah number 1 of chapter 2. If the members of the great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem are not familiar with that person who saw the new moon, i.e., that he's qualified as a valid witness, the members of his local court of 23 send another with him to testify about him, a character witness for the witness. And the Mishnah adds, initially, the court would accept testimony to determine the start of the month from any person, as all are presumed to be qualified witnesses, absent any disqualifying factors. If you find out a father and son came, okay, they can't both testify together. But, normally an adult person who is qualified to be a witness is assumed to be a qualified witness. However, when the Boethusians, a sect whose members had their own opinions with regard to the establishment of the festivals, corrupted the process by sending false witnesses to testify about the new moon, the sages instituted that they would accept this testimony only from those men familiar to the Sanhedrin as valid witnesses. And in a little while, we're going to read about an incident of that. But take a step back for a second and picture this. So what's happening is the Sanhedrin, right, is basically composed of Pharisees, meaning sages in the tradition of the rabbis and previous sages, who have brought down the oral Torah, who's the core of the oral Torah, a bunch of laws, but sort of just like a small core. The oral Torah grew and grew and grew and grew with every generation. The core of the oral Torah, meaning a few specific teachings that God gave Moses orally at Mount Sinai, along with the idea that you would have an oral tradition that would be passed down teacher to student in every generation, and that's why it was authorized to grow in every generation, that began at Mount Sinai. But there were other people later on, this is already 1,500 years after Mount Sinai and the Torah was given. There were other people who said, no, we don't accept the authority of the oral Torah and the rabbis who transmit the oral Torah, and these include the Boethusians and the Samaritans. The Sadducees. The Samaritans were something else. So what we're talking about is the authority of who is the religious leadership of the nation, right? Not the king who's sending armies to war and making sure that the roads are repaired, but who is dictating, how we follow Torah law. When does a new month begin in the calendar? When will we observe the festivals of Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, etc.? That all has to be under some kind of central authority, or it's going to be chaos in the nation. Now, so you have this minority who doesn't subscribe to the authority of the sages, and they want to undermine that authority. How do they do it? Do they have protests in the street? Do they just, speak sarcastically about the sages? Yes. And they go much further than that. And they try to undermine the authority through trickery and cleverness and doing these corrupt practices, like sending a witness to lie before the Sanhedrin. Now, this is kind of crazy when these are people that if they don't subscribe to the religious authority of the sages because they have a problem with the oral Torah, it must be that they disagree with it, but they're pious individuals who think, well, okay, the chain of transmission of Torah knowledge comes a little bit different way, but they serve God. They submit to the will of God. And yet, they're going to send someone in to swear in court, that they're going to tell the truth, so help me God, that kind of adjuration. They're going to answer questions before they're going to answer questions first about the fact that they've come to tell the truth and to give true testimony. And then they're going to lie because they have their own idea of how things should be run. When we think about that today, the country's so divided. One side hates the other so much, the other side hates back, and the ends justify the means, and people are so angry. There's nothing new under the sun. So there were people who held these lofty ideals, but were willing to put their ideals aside to get their way. Something to think about. Okay. So when the Boethusians, corrupted this witness process, the sages instituted that they would accept testimony only from those men who were already qualified, who were familiar to the Sanhedrin as valid witnesses. And if they weren't familiar with the person, then they had to get a character reference, a character witness to come and say, somebody that they would accept, whose authority they did accept, to then, testify that this person who saw the moon is valid as a witness, is trustworthy as a witness. That's the Mishna. Gemara. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the statement in the Mishna that another would be sent along to testify with regard to the qualification of the witness to the new moon? If it means that one other individual would be sent, but is one witness ever deemed credible? Isn't it taught in a Baraisa? There was an incident in which one potential witness came to testify, and his witnesses were with him as they came to testify about him. The use of the plural, his witnesses came with him, indicates that two witnesses are required to establish somebody as a valid witness. And Rav Papa said, what is the meaning of the term another? It means another pair of witnesses. So if two witnesses come, and one is known to the Sanhedrin and the other is not known, well, that other person, the one who is unknown, he's going to have to bring 2 further witnesses with him to testify that he is trustworthy. And the Gemara comments, this too stands to reason, for if you do not say so, then the opening statement of our Mishna, if the members of the great Sanhedrin are not familiar with this person, it is problematic. What is the meaning of the term, that one person? If we say it is referring to that one witness, is one witness deemed credible? And the word judgment is written with regard to the establishment of the new moon and Rosh Hashana, for it is a statute for Israel, a judgment of the God of Israel, Psalm 81:5, and judgments require 2 witnesses. Rather, what is the meaning of the term, that one? That pair of witnesses. And so too here, what is the meaning of the term another pair of witnesses? We skip down a little bit to the incident. When Ulla came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said they sanctified the new moon on a certain date in the west, in Eretz Yisrael. Now, although Ulla was the only witness, his testimony was accepted. And Rav Kahana said, it is not necessary to say that Ulla, who is a great man, is deemed credible with regard to such testimony. Rather, even an ordinary person is deemed credible in this case, as there is no need for 2 witnesses. You need 2 witnesses to testify before the Sanhedrin that they saw the new moon and that the Sanhedrin can now sanctify the new month and declare the new month has begun. But for somebody to report to another community far away from Jerusalem that the Sanhedrin met in Jerusalem, heard the testimony of witnesses, and declared that the new month had begun, and now you're carrying the news to the Babylonian Jewish community, this person is not really testifying, right? He's just saying, yeah, you can take it from me. The Sanhedrin declared the new month. He's not testifying before a court the way the witnesses that came before the Sanhedrin were testifying before a court. And that's why even an ordinary person is deemed credible. What is the reason for this? With regard to any matter that is likely to be revealed, people do not lie about it. The Gemara comments that this is also taught in a Baraisa. If one person comes from the other end of the world and says, the court sanctified the new month, he's deemed credible, even though they don't know anything about him, because there's no need for 2 witnesses, because everyone's going to find out soon enough when the new month began. This person will be revealed as a liar if he's telling a lie. The Mishna taught initially, whereas, right, the ones who saw the moon, they might be the only 2 people who come before the court. They're the only ones who saw what they saw and came before the court to testify. So it might not be revealed that the moon wasn't really there. You had to be up in the middle of the night and see exactly the right sliver at the right time, etc. The Mishna taught initially they would accept testimony to determine the start of the month from any person. And this continued until the Boethusians began to corrupt the process. What was the manner of the corruption in which the Boethusians engaged? What did they do? What was the incident? Once, the Boethusians tried to mislead the sages with regard to the day of the new moon. What did they do? They hired 2 people for 400 dinars, a huge amount of money, to testify falsely that they had seen the new moon on the 30th day of the month. In other words, it was going to be a short month, and they were coming to say, yeah, we saw the moon, begin the new month. The old month is only going to be 29 days, and the new month begins now, as opposed to the following day after a full month. This is a small month, a shortened month. Now, one of these 2 purchased corrupt witnesses was from our own, i.e., a member of the Pharisees and the sages of Israel. And the other corrupt witness was one of theirs, the Boethusians. It's like, wait, what? The Boethusians are corrupting the process by sending paid witnesses before the Sanhedrin. And now we learn that there were 2 witnesses. There need to be 2. One of them was a corrupt Boethusian, and the other was one of the sages of Israel? What? When they went in to testify, their witness, the Boethusian witness, submitted his testimony that he had seen the new moon, and then he left. When our witness came to testify, they said to him in the customary manner, say how you saw the moon. And he said to them, I was ascending in Male Adumim, and I saw the new moon was crouched between two rocks. Its head was like a calf, its ears were like those of a kid goat, its horns were like those of a deer, and its tail was lying between its thighs. And I looked at it, and I was frightened, and I fell backward. And if you do not believe me that this is what I saw, here's 200 dinars wrapped in my cloak that were paid to me to deliver this testimony. Realizing that the testimony of the first witness was also false, the sages said to the second witness, who persuaded you to act in this manner? He said to them, I heard that the Boethusians were seeking to mislead the sages. And I said to myself, I will go and hire myself out to give false testimony, and I will inform the sages of the truth, lest unworthy people come and mislead the sages. Since he heard that the Boethusians were out there willing to pay money to witnesses who would lie, he was afraid that they would find two witnesses and the sages would be misled. So he volunteered to be an undercover corrupt witness, get the money, learn what it was they want, what kind of corruption they were paying for, come in and report to the sages. And that is what he did. The sages said to him, the 200 dinars that you received from the Boethusians are given to you as a gift. Although you did not carry out your mission, your corrupt mission, the court is authorized to declare the money ownerless and award it to you. And the one who hired you, the corrupt Boethusians who sought to, create this corruption, they shall be stretched out on the post and whipped. At that time, the sages instituted that they would accept testimony about the new moon only from those men who were familiar to the great Sanhedrin as qualified witnesses. That concludes our Gemara of Mishnah number 1. Mishnah 2. Initially, after the court sanctified the new month, they would light torches on the mountaintops. Fire on the mountain. They would light torches on the mountaintops from one peak to another to signal the community in Babylonia that the month had been sanctified. After the Samaritans were also trying to corrupt this process, the Kutim, corrupted and ruined this method by lighting torches at the wrong times to confuse the Jews. The sages instituted that messengers should go out to the diaspora and inform them of the start of the month. Think about it. Messengers are much slower than fire on the mountain. Right? If you can light a signal fire on the mountain, 10, 20 miles away on the next mountain, they could see that fire. They could light a fire. That would be visible to the next mountaintop 10, 20 miles away. And very fast, you could, get a message out there hundreds of miles, right? In ancient times, to get a message out hundreds of miles, incredible. But because these Samaritans didn't submit to the authority of the sages in Jerusalem, and they didn't think that they should be hearing testimony and sending out the word and sanctifying the month, etc., they wanted to undermine that process, so they built their own signal fires on mountains at the wrong time and made the whole process untrustworthy, unreliable, and they had to end the fast signal because it was subject to corruption. And that's when they instituted that messengers would go out and deliver the news personally. And the Mishnah asks, when they were sending the signal out by fire on the mountain, how would they light the torches during that earlier period? They would bring items that burn well. For example, long poles of cedar, reeds, pine wood, and beaten flax, and tie them together with a string. And someone would then ascend to the top of the mountain and light the torch on fire with them and wave it back and forth and up and down until he would see his colleague doing likewise on the top of the second mountain. In this manner, he would know that the next messenger had received the message and passed it on, and similarly, the second torch bearer would wait for a signal from the one on top of the third mountain, and so on. And in this manner, the message would reach the diaspora. So interesting, it wasn't just that they lit a bonfire that was on top of the mountain. They had like essentially a very long pole with a torch on top, and then they needed to move it up and down, side to side. So the one that was seeing it from a long distance away would see that movement and know that it wasn't some kind of a natural phenomenon, this fire, this distant fire, that, who knows, maybe just some fire happened or somebody lit a campfire or something. But with that motion up, down, and side to side, they could tell that it was purposely the signal fire signaling that the new month had been declared. And from which mountains would they light the torches? They would transmit the message from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem to Sartava, and from Sartava to Gerafina, and from Gerafina to Havran, and from Havran to Beis Baltin, and from Beis Baltin they would not move to light torches in any other predetermined location. Rather, the one who was appointed for this task would wave the torch back and forth, up and down, until he would see the entire diaspora before him alight like one large bonfire, as they would light torches to continue transmitting the messages from place to place, all the way to the farthest reaches of the diaspora. That's the Mishnah. That was Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 2. Gemara. The sages taught in a Baraisa torches were lit only for a new month whose moon was seen at its proper time, i.e. on the 30th day of the outgoing month, to sanctify the upcoming new moon on that date and declare the previous month as containing 29 days. In this case, the 30th day would be declared the first day of the new month. And when would they light the torches? It was on the eve of its additional day, the one that would have been added had it been a full 30-day month, i.e. on the eve of the 31st day of the outgoing month. So the 29th day is the last day of the month, right? And then that night, the witnesses see it. They come in, and in the morning on the 30th day, they say, we saw the new moon. So this is not the 30th day of the old month. Rather, this is the first day of the new month. The Sanhedrin declares it's a new month. And then that night, you have to do it at night. That's when it's going to be visible. That night, they would light the torches on the mountain and pass the word out from mountaintop to mountaintop. And the Gemara asks, but what they're telling us is, if on the on the morning of the 30th day, the witnesses didn't come in because they didn't see the moon that previous night, and it's going to be a 9-day month, then the following day after that, the witnesses come and testify that they saw that, and the Sanhedrin declares the new month because they still go through that process, but they don't light the torches at all because the torches only tell you, okay, the new month started on the 30th day. Once it didn't start on the 30th day, everyone knows it will start on the 31st day. There's no 31-day months. It's either 29 or 30. So if we didn't start a new month on the 30th day, we know the new month will begin on the 31st day. Okay, now we skip forward a little bit. Actually, we're going to skip the A side of page 23, and we pick it up on the B side of page 23. The Mishnah taught he would wave the torch back and forth and up and down until he would see the entire diaspora before him, alight like one large bonfire. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning in this context of the term diaspora? Which certainly cannot be referring to the entire diaspora, all Jews living outside of the land of Israel. We can't see all of them lighting bonfires. What does it mean? And Rav Yosef said, this is referring to the city of Pumbedisa in Babylonia. And the Gemara further asks, what is the meaning of the phrase, like one large bonfire? It is taught in a Baraisa, each and every individual would take a torch in his hand and ascend to the top of his roof and light it, and in this manner, the entire city would present the appearance of a large bonfire. But it's amazing that they're going to, do this system of mountaintop to mountaintop and get it from Jerusalem to Pumbedisa. I mean, that's like many hundreds of miles from Jerusalem to the Babylonian Jewish community. That concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 2. Mishnah number 3. There was a large courtyard in Jerusalem, which was called Beis Yazek. And there, all the witnesses coming to testify about the new moon would gather. And the court of 71 judges would examine them there, and they would prepare great feasts for them so that they would be willing and accustomed to coming and submitting their testimony. As we discussed Saturday night, they always encouraged everybody who wanted to come and testify and who was qualified to testify to come and do so. Even though you might have many more witnesses than you need because they all saw the new moon, they were up at night, they were ready, they came. You might have 40 pairs of witnesses, and that's good because a time might come when it's difficult to travel and the weather is bad and hardly anyone sees it, and only one pair of witnesses will show up to testify before the Sanhedrin. So against that possibility, we always encourage everyone who wants to do this to do it. And so there were many months when a whole lot of witnesses would arrive. And then they would go to a waiting area before testifying before the Sanhedrin. And this is that waiting area. Now, initially, when witnesses would arrive on Shabbos from a distant place, they would not move from this courtyard all day, as they had left their Shabbos techum. They had left their Shabbos limit, right? They desecrated Shabbos in the sense that they walked more than 2,000 cubits on Shabbos, and that's permitted in order to give this testimony. But as we learned in Tractate Eruvin, if you walk further than you're supposed to, and then you arrive at a new city and you realize you went too far, now you don't have the run of the city, as it were, like the people who live in that city. Wherever you end up, you only have 4 cubits in each direction. You need to kind of basically sit down and wait till the end of Shabbos before you're free to move around. And that was the situation of these witnesses initially. And it was consequently prohibited for them to walk more than 4 cubits in any direction once they had completed their mission. Concerned that this limitation would discourage witnesses from coming, you come all the way, long walk, get to Jerusalem, and now you can't walk around Jerusalem at all, you're stuck in this courtyard. Rabban Gamliel, the elder, instituted that the witnesses be permitted to walk 2,000 cubits in each direction. I'm almost done, so if you have any questions or comments, get them in. And the Mishnah continues, and not only these witnesses are granted 2,000 cubits from their new place, but this principle applies also to a midwife who comes to deliver a child. A pregnant woman is giving birth on Shabbos. They need a midwife. The midwife walks more than the 2,000 cubits that are permitted to her. She helps the woman deliver the baby. Beautiful birth. Everything is great. Is the midwife now stuck because she's outside her techum? No, because we don't want to discourage her from coming. So as a special decree of the rabbis, this midwife now has the same Shabbos limits as the people at her destination, and she has 2,000 cubits in any direction from there. This also applies to one who comes to rescue Jews from a fire, from an invasion of one who comes to rescue from an invasion of troops who are attacking the Jewish people, people who are fleeing from a flooding river or from a collapse of a building. All these are considered like the inhabitants of the city where they arrive, and therefore they have 2,000 cubits in each direction. That concludes what we'll be discussing tonight. And tomorrow at 5:30 Pacific time, meaning a half hour earlier than usual, we'll continue with Mishnah number 4 that we'll find at the bottom of page 23, and then we'll go on to page 24. All right. Who is with us? What questions do we have here for pages 22 and 23 of Tractate Rosh Hashana? Whoa, Nina's telling me many questions. Bill, is the merchant who deals in produce of the sabbatical year, perhaps analogically, by analogy, also banning those who trade in futures? I'm thinking because a futures trader is in many ways a professional gambler as well, albeit one with a relatively more safe bet than a dice player. That's very interesting. I don't think they're saying that. They're just saying that during the sabbatical year, you're allowed to eat what grows by itself. The farmer can't plant and the farmer can't harvest, but as a commercial operation. But people can just go in the field and pick food for what they need to eat, right? So you can and bring that inside the house and eat that. But somebody who, even though it was the farmer, didn't plant and the farmer didn't harvest, but stuff grows in the fields naturally, right? There's just going to be food growing in the fields, even if it wasn't planted. Certain foods will just, there was enough seeds there in the previous years that they'll still sprout. Orchards will still be bearing fruit, etc. So somebody who, goes into, and all the fields are considered ownerless, right? Because during the sabbatical year, it's like the fields are considered ownerless, and that's why any person can go into any field and pick food just for his own immediate needs. So a person who takes advantage of that, picks more than what he needs for his own needs, and then goes and sells it, that person is a sinner. He's disobeying the laws of the sabbatical year. And you can imagine, so then it makes sense that one should be disqualified from giving testimony, especially in capital cases, but even to say that he's seen the moon to sanctify the new month. Renee. But your question, Bill, would the kind of organized gambler of somebody, who's a day trader in the stock market, is that somehow likened to a professional gambler? It's hard to say. And also like somebody who's a professional poker player today, where it's kind of like recognized televised sport with sponsors, would that person be disqualified from testifying before Beis Din? It's more like the people who were considered professional gamblers back then. That was a very unsavory type of character. But the justification that was given might apply to modern day poker players as well, because when we encountered that and we saw that the reason that those people are considered technically thieves is because the one who gambles with the professional gambler is not expecting to lose his money. There's a lot of nuance there. It's not really the subject of today's discussion, but it's a good question. Renee, so I wonder if that would also mean that the Beis Din could not compel the testimony of ordinarily disqualified witnesses. I think you're right? If somebody is, so there are certain cases where you can compel a witness to testify, a reluctant witness, right? They could, coerce the witness to testify because there's a pressing, public equity need for that. But I think that would not apply to a witness who's disqualified from testifying even voluntarily. So I think that's a good point. Bell, I'm going to jump in and suggest that there were traders in ancient times, see Jonah and 2 Kings, going to distant realms. So these merchants were speculating on their returns, whether they would make a profit or lose their stake if there was a disaster at sea or whatever. For sure, there were merchants like that. We talk about that a lot. And that is not somebody who is disqualified from giving testimony. I mean, that's a businessman in a high-risk venture. That's different than a professional gambler who's not really creating a product that may or may not sell. The professional gambler is just trying to outsmart his opponents, and maybe that's the difference. Seraphim, are there tractates that go into more detail on the rulings concerning lending and usury? Yes, we will come to that. Ifa, why not just apply a time limit on a missing person after such time he is presumed dead and his wife is free to remarry? That's a great solution, and they sort of did something like that, right? Because of this problem, husbands who were going to war would give a conditional bill of divorce to their wives, that this is your bill of divorce if I do not return by such and such a date, that kind of thing. But without that kind of a mechanism, it would not be automatically assumed to be in place. And finally, Sharon, I get it that some didn't buy into the ruling authority of the Sanhedrin, but what is the gain of undermining the announcement of the months other than discrediting of the courts? And I think you answered your own question. I think that is the only gain, and that's enough for them. It's sort of like that attitude of après-moi le deluge, just tear it all down, destroy everything, and then maybe, their own structures of authority will rise in its place. But they didn't have enough power to have a parallel system, so they just wanted to undermine the existing system and damn the consequences for the common person. And we have people like that today as well. You just really have to be careful of people who are so, committed to their ideals that they'll destroy anyone who disagrees with them. It's a very dangerous type of attitude. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow to continue with page 24 here in Tractate Rosh Hashana, a half hour early, 5:30 Pacific tomorrow, Tuesday. All the best. Have a great night.